Hey, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Fridays with Ferber. Today we take another road trip to Sheffield Village, Ohio, and sit down with Phil Truax of the Truax Law Group. And Phil was kind enough not just to lend us some of his time, but also provide some insight and words of wisdom that might be a benefit for all of you watching. So stay tuned and listen to what Phil has to share. First things first, Phil, tell us a little about yourself. What drove you to become an attorney?
Yeah, so I actually went to school to be a broadcaster of all things.
Okay.
Went to Ohio University, was into broadcasting, and spent a lot of times in the sports world. For a variety of reasons, decided that the broadcasting industry wasn't right for me, and I knew I was going to have a family and wanted to make sure that I picked a career that was right for that. So I picked a lawyer. I don't know if that was the right move or not, but that's where I ended up. I like helping people. I like presenting. I like a little bit of grinding blood in there to argue a little bit.
Sure.
And so there's that, fighting for people and arguing for people, but really helping people avoid problems.
Yeah.
I've really grown over the course of my career to really appreciate that. Have spent the majority of my career working with a variety of businesses, worked with some larger law firms earlier in my career, and then as I developed my own family and kind of really anchored down here in Northeast Ohio, spent the majority of my time working with smaller businesses.
That's great. So Phil, born and raised Lorraine County, right?
That's right.
Like I said, what he touched on in his years of experience, he's worked with larger firms, and now you have your own firm, correct?
I do.
What was the motivation for you to go out on your own?
So first I want to correct one thing that I just said. I was actually born in Chicago.
Oh, okay. So
grew up here in Avon Lake. I'm an Avon Lake grad and live in Avon, work in Sheffield, but I want to correct the record there.
It makes sense for the Chicago Cubs Wrigley Field thing.
There
That's my fault, not Phil's. So.
I spent some time at a leadership position with Wick and Sturzer Panza, a great firm in Avon, and had a really good experience working with those folks. Then I took a role about a year ago, about 9 days before the world shut down because of COVID. Took a leadership role with a statewide estate planning and elder care firm.
Okay.
And despite all of it, and despite all the challenges there, we had a pretty good year and learned a lot more about leadership and firm growth and management, and really trying to do the right thing for the good of the organization. And when I knew that I wanted to be back in the business world, and I work a lot with construction companies and contractors and real estate and things like that, I knew I wanted to get back into that, and I just kind of thought that now was the right time to kind of create a new firm and really try to be as value oriented and client centric as possible, and thought the best way to do that would be just to start a brand new company.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Sure.
Sometimes you just got to what's the phrase? Kick the tires, light the fires.
There you have it.
Yeah, well, that's excellent. So you mentioned your focus in business, some construction law, and you've had, practice with business entities, correct?
Correct.
Let's say I'm a business owner, which technically I am.
Not technically, you are.
I am, thank you. Yeah, this guy's great. So what should I be thinking of, concerned of, focusing on from a legal standpoint to protect myself, the company, my employees, stuff of that nature? Like, what would you say, a couple of things, if I have, I'm a brand new business, or, okay, let's step back. I'm a brand new business. What should I look at from a law protection side?
Well, certainly you have to have an entity. You have to have, it's not a good idea to do any business just on your own, in your own name. You want to set up a separate company, an LLC, a corporation, something like that. And to set it up appropriately, to have it set up with the Secretary of State's website and a federal tax ID number and the governing documents, whether it might be an operating agreement for an LLC, or there's all sorts of different documents that for those different companies, those different company forms rather. But short of making this segment a 3-hour segment of all of the things that you would want to do in setting up a business, I would say, and of course it depends on what industry you're in, but usually whether it's services or goods that you're in that business, you got to make sure that you got good contracts. Okay. And you got to make sure that you have systems and procedures set up to use those agreements, whether they're contracts for selling your services or selling your goods or buying the materials, buying the services, so that you can conduct business for your clients, your customers. Those contracts, they're easy to gloss over. No matter what generation that you're in, we like to operate with handshakes. We like to operate with people that we trust. We like to do business with our friends and just think people are going to do the right thing. And by and large, they do. But it's those 1 out of every 100 times, or whatever the fraction is, that's you get bit. And you often get bit when you don't have those systems, procedures, and documents in place. And when you do have to have that dispute handled or even negotiated, even if it's just, how are we going to solve this problem? And you don't have those terms down that you agreed to, you got a big problem. So, and that's obviously when you're starting off a new business or you're young in a new business, making sure that you have all those agreements in place. And by the way, most of the time it's easy. Most of the time, this is not difficult stuff, expensive stuff.
Yeah,
so
and that's
super important.
Yeah, I was going to say, you kind of get a build-up to where I hear a lot of people, maybe I should go talk to an attorney, but I don't know if I should, blah, blah, blah. You like me, we like to keep it simple, right?
Definitely. Definitely. Everybody likes to keep it simple. When you keep it simple, it allows for easier and clearer communication, which ultimately that's the source of any breakdown or success in any relationship. And having one document that just lays out, here's what we're doing for you, here's when we're going to do it, here's what it's going to cost, and here are a couple of other terms that we have, and you lay it out, and it's easy. It doesn't cost very much for a lawyer to handle that for you. Absolutely is a necessity for any small business.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. So I am a business. I have these processes in place, but it's been a few years. Can you come in and take a look and make sure we're, up to speed with everything? Nothing's kind of, because again, when you start off a business you got a lot of things going on in your head. So hopefully you had it in place back then, but sometimes that's not always the case, right?
And maybe you don't do it right.
Okay.
Because like you say, there's a lot of things going on when you're starting a business. You're ramping up a business, you're changing a business, you're absorbing maybe a new product line or service line, and you want to set up those processes, those systems, those procedures, those documents. Maybe you don't do it right. But yeah, the answer to your question is absolutely.
Okay.
A business owner can and should have those systems and documents and agreements audited, is one word people like to use. But yeah, just take a quick look and see if we're missing anything. See if we got anything wrong, or that may require a conversation about a couple of transactions or sales or business partners of issues that they ran into, and how do we make sure that those issues are handled or at least considered when the documents are prepared. So no doubt about that. Again, not a real complicated and expensive project, but invaluable, really.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Okay. I'm going to take off my business owner hat, put on my husband and father hat, right?
Got it.
So 3 young kids, or whatever the case might be, what should my wife and I be looking at in terms of maybe protecting them down the line should something, God willing, bad happen to us?
Sure.
There's the wills and trusts out there. There's the old mindset that I got to be a millionaire to have a trust. Can you help me clarify some of that stuff?
Sure. A couple of things, for all families, but young families in particular. As I mentioned, working at Ayler Stallings for a year in estate planning and elder care law, a leadership role, but nonetheless in that area of the law, run into folks of all ages and situations. With young families and children, you've got to make sure that your will, that number one, you have a will.
Yeah.
Number two, that the will appoints a guardian for your children. You've got to have that conversation with your spouse to make sure you know who is going to take care of the kids if something happens to us. And then typically, maybe not all the time, every estate plan is different, every family is different, but for young families, revocable trusts are a great tool.
Okay.
It's a tool to avoid the probate court process. Which is what happens when you die without a will or with a will and you have significant assets. Those assets have to be submitted through the probate court, which is expensive and takes a lot of time. But as it relates to young families, having a revocable trust allows a trustee to be appointed at your and your wife's death that may act as that guardian that your will references, but if nothing else, manages the wealth and assets that you and your wife have accumulated
Okay.
over the course of your marriage and your lifetime, so that those assets are managed for the care and the health and the education and the maintenance for the kids until they reach a certain age, which may be 18, maybe 25, maybe 30, maybe tiered, because
right.
if Bill, you and I know that if our parents would have passed away with, call it $1 million in assets when we were 18, and we inherit that money at 18, I think you and I both know how that story would have ended.
Yeah, that one party at mom and dad's house would have been a little bit bigger.
So we want to have documents set up for you and your wife, so that there is that really structured, thought out process of how the kids can be cared for and then benefited over the course of their lifetime in a real strong way, such that you've got a trustee that's really driving that bus and handling it for them.
Okay, great. Thank you. So is it true every $1 to $2 you spent today on setting up this will and trust is going to save the generation X amount of dollars in probate down the line? I heard that one time from an attorney.
Yeah, that probate is a, it's twofold, really. I mean, it's costs between attorney's fees and court costs, which, depending on the assets, if you've got two pieces of property, for example, and both of them have to go through probate, that's going to drive up the probate costs significantly. Okay. And that's just one example. The other is time, and then just the stress of having to go through the probate court when a family member's just passed away. The last thing that you really want to do is to go ahead and hire a lawyer and then wade through the probate court for 12 months, 14 months, 8 months, whatever it is. It's not something that you want to have to deal with after your parents pass away or whatever it is. So certainly the probate court dollars that are associated with a passing of a loved one are things you want to avoid, but the time and stress and the emotion is certainly part of that. And then, of course, if you're in a different stage of life and you don't have young kids, your kids are grown, well, then the estate planning considerations change significantly.
Sure.
And then if you're in the retiree stage, then you're thinking about asset protection, where you're trying to think, boy, nobody wants to go to a nursing home, and we'll never go into a nursing home, honey, but 70% of people over the age of 65 in this country see some form of long-term care at some point in their life. And that requires a whole different set of planning, and maybe you're talking about asset protection trust planning or something along those lines, which are also, it's a whole nother conversation, but an important conversation. Things that people don't love talking about, but you got to consider it.
It's a need, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Phil. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate this. And I know I said God willing, God forbidden, right? That if something happens to me.
Yeah, willing is usually, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's been a long morning.
I'm better with numbers than I am with words, so. Anyways, Phil, appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. There we have it. Another edition of Fridays with Ferber. A big thank you goes out to Phil for taking the time to meet with me today. I really appreciated his insight and words of wisdom. So if you'd like to get into contact with Phil, there is a contact button following this video. Click on that and you can go from there. Otherwise, hope you have a great day, great weekend, and look forward to seeing you next time on Fridays with Ferber. Take care.